A millionaire was about to lose everything. $200 million walked toward the door, and when he heard a voice, it was a girl, the invisible daughter of the cleaning woman. She spoke perfect Chinese, saving the negotiation that no adult could rescue. He had ignored her all his life. She, without resentment, saved him. Sometimes wisdom does not wear an expensive suit. Sometimes it comes barefoot in silence, waiting for someone to finally see it. Like this, if it touched your soul, it is more than a click. It is a silent hug between those who know that the heart has no price. Comment how you think this story will end. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it costs you nothing. But for us, it means the whole world. Thank you for being here. The 10 o'clock morning sun went through the windows of the 40th floor, as if it wanted to make every inch of polished steel and Italian marble shine. The Vance Tech meeting room seemed to float over New York, suspended between the clouds and the roofs that stretched to the horizon. There, in that palace of glass and ambition, Jack Vance adjusted his Hermes tie with precise gestures in front of the executive bathroom mirror. 45 years old, angular jaw, strategic grey hair on the temples that gave him that experienced wolf air that business magazines loved to photograph. He had built his artificial intelligence empire from zero, or at least that was what he told in interviews. The truth, as always, was more complex. Loans from his father-in-law, 2 silent partners who had left with a broken heart and empty hands, and an exceptional ability to sell smoke as if it were pure oxygen. Today he could not fail. $200 million. A delegation from Shanghai led by the legendary Chen Wei, the investor who had turned 3 startups into unicorns and who detected falsehood like a shark detects a drop of blood from miles away. Sarah arrives in 15 minutes. Mark, his operations director, told him, showing his head, the interpreter. Confirmed that she speaks fluent Mandarin. That is what her resume says. She worked in Beijing for 2 years. Jack nodded, although a cold knot tightened in his stomach. The original interpreter had cancelled yesterday for a family emergency. Sarah Smith was a last-minute replacement, recommended by a contact who knew someone who knew someone. In the world of 9-figure investments, that was the same as jumping without a parachute and trusting that someone would knit one during the fall. 3 floors below, in the labyrinth of service hallways that beautiful people never saw, Mary Silver pushed her cleaning cart with the silent efficiency of someone who has perfected the art of invisibility. 42 years that looked like 50 under the cruel fluorescent light. Rough hands, knees that protested at every step, a tired beauty hidden under the navy blue uniform and the practical hairstyle that nobody looked at twice. She'd been cleaning other people's dreams for 15 years. She collected half-finished coffee cups where the remains of conversations about millions floated. She emptied trash cans full of draft contracts that were worth more than everything she would earn in her life. And she did it with dignity, with that quiet strength that single mothers have who have learned that the world does not give gifts, only opportunities to show that they can handle everything. Mom, is it going to take much longer? Lucy's soft voice floated from the end of the hallway. Mary turned and her face softened immediately. Lucy, 12 years old and with a look too old for her age, walked with her worn backpack hanging from one shoulder. The jeans had a patch on the knee, made with so much care that it almost looked like a design detail. The t-shirt was second-hand, but it was perfect, ironed with the fierce love of a mother who cannot give luxury, but will never allow her daughter to go out looking neglected. School let out early for a teacher meeting. There was nowhere to leave you, my dear. It is okay. Lucy smiled, that smile that broke Mary's heart because it carried too much understanding for a child. I can do my homework in the break room. Mary stroked her cheek, a quick gesture that contained all the love and all the guilt in the world. Stay very quiet, okay? Today there is an important meeting on the 40th floor, many serious people. Lucy nodded, used to making herself small in big spaces. She had spent entire afternoons in those hallways, reading under cold lights, waiting for Mum to finish cleaning the kingdoms where she could never enter. Not for lack of intelligence, her grades were perfect, even in the overcrowded public school where teachers barely remembered names, but for that other invisible thing called opportunity that seemed to be distributed like water in the desert, abundant for some, non-existent for others. The elevator opened on the 40th floor with a soft ding that sounded like money. Mary pushed her cart toward the meeting room, Lucy walking by her side like a silent shadow. The panoramic windows let the light in an almost obscene way, as if the sky itself were private property of those who could afford those views. Jack Vance appeared in the hallway, talking on the phone with that forced voice that CEOs adopt when they want to sound simultaneously authoritative and accessible. He passed Mary and Lucy as if they were part of the furniture. Not maliciously. He simply did not see them. His world was populated by people with last names that opened doors, titles that impressed, faces that appeared on LinkedIn with thousands of connections. Then his eyes registered something. A girl, on his floor, on his most important day. He stopped dead. Mary. The voice was sharp, impatient. Finish quickly here. The Chinese investors arrive in 10 minutes and this has to be perfect. Can, please? He looked at Lucy with an expression that tried not to be cruel but succeeded anyway. I don't want children walking around here today. Lucy looked down automatically, shrinking as if she could disappear. Mary felt a familiar fury rise in her throat, that helpless rage of mothers who see their children treated like obstacles, but she swallowed it like she had learned to swallow so many things. Of course, Mr. Vance. It will be fast. Jack had already turned around, the phone stuck to his ear, his Italian shoes clicking on the floor like a declaration of conquered territory. Mary squeezed the handle of the cart until her knuckles turned white. Don't listen to him, my love, she whispered. You are worth more than all the expensive suits in this building. Lucy nodded, but something in her eyes had hardened. Not with resentment. She had moved past that long ago, but with a silent determination that her mother recognized, because it was the same one that had kept her standing for 15 years of double shifts and empty refrigerators. She sat in a corner of the hallway, took out her worn tablet, bought third-hand with a scratched but functional screen, and connected to the company Wi-Fi. On the screen, the smiling face of a Chinese teacher appeared, explaining the tones of Mandarin with infinite patience. Lucy put on her broken headphones, held together with tape but still useful, and began to repeat in a low voice, her lips moving with precision. 3 years. 3 years studying alone, without teachers or expensive academies, only YouTube, free apps, and a hunger to learn that even she didn't fully understand. At first it had been out of curiosity. She found a Chinese drama by accident and was fascinated by the impossible sounds, the tones that went up and down like music. Then came the obsession to understand every word, every detail. But what really hooked her were the documentaries, videos about technology, about data privacy, about ethics in artificial intelligence, entire conferences in Mandarin about the future of humanity in a world where machines learn to think. Lucy watched them over and over, pausing, rewinding, writing words in a worn notebook, building her own dictionary of the future. At school, her teachers considered her a good student, but quiet. They didn't know that at night, while Mom slept exhausted on the sofa because she had given her the only bed. Lucy traveled to Shanghai, to Shenzhen, to virtual conference rooms where brilliant people debated about algorithms that could change the world or destroy it. They didn't know that this invisible girl with the patched uniform could hold a technical conversation in Mandarin about machine learning, that she understood data protection better than many adults, that she had memorized legal vocabulary just because she found it fascinating how words could build bridges or dig abysses between cultures. Mary moved the mop across the marble floor with mechanical movements, perfect from repetition. She could clean that room with her eyes closed. She knew every corner, every invisible stain that only she saw, every reflection in the panoramic windows that showed a city where millions of people like her kept the world turning while others took the credit. "Ready, Mum," she murmured, putting away the mop. Mary looked at her daughter, still submerged in that world of strange sounds, and felt something like pride mixed with pain. Lucy was smarter than all the executives walking through these hallways, but the world would never know. "You were born on the wrong floor, my love," she thought, "and that decides everything." The elevator opened again and 3 people came out, a tall man about 50 years old in a perfect dark suit, a young woman dressed completely in black with a leather briefcase, and an assistant who carried a laptop as if it were a king's crown. Behind them, Jack Vance appeared with his star salesman smile, his hand extended, his bleached teeth shining under the LED lights. "Mr. Chen, it is an immense honor to receive you." The tall man, Chen Wei, Lucy recognized his face from the conferences she had seen online, shook hands with formal courtesy, but without warmth. "Mr. Vance, thank you for receiving us." The voice was deep, measured, with an accent that transformed the sounds into something softer. Sarah, the interpreter, placed herself between them like a necessary but uncomfortable bridge. They passed Mary and Lucy without seeing them. Ghosts in service of the important living. Mary grabbed her cart and began to walk away, but Lucy stayed frozen for one more second, watching how those people disappeared into the meeting room where futures that would never include her would be decided. Something in her chest tightened. It was not envy. She had moved past that too. It was something more complex, the painful awareness that talent without opportunity is like having wings in a closed cage. "Let's go, dear." Mary's soft voice pulled her out of her thoughts. Lucy picked up her backpack and followed her mother down the hallway, but before turning the corner, she looked back one last time. The glass door of the meeting room closed with a soft click, sealing worlds that would never touch. Or so she thought. The meeting room smelled like expensive leather and fresh coffee. Jack had ordered everything to be prepared with millimetric precision, bottles of San Pellegrino water, French pastries on porcelain plates, even a vase with white orchids that cost more than Mary's monthly salary. Chen Wei sat at the end of the table, flanked by his assistant, a young man with rectangular glasses named Lin, and by Mrs. Zhou, Director of Risk Analysis. The three had that intimidating stillness of those who have seen thousands of presentations and can detect a lie before it finishes leaving the mouth. Sarah, the interpreter, took a position next to Jack, with her notebook open and a Mont Blanc pen that tried to communicate professionalism. But her hands were shaking slightly. Mark, Vance Tech's operations director, noticed it and felt the first chill of worry. "We are truly honored by your presence," Jack began, activating his smile number 3. Warm but serious, reliable but ambitious. Vance Tech represents the future of ethical artificial intelligence in the West. Sarah translated into Mandarin with apparent fluency. Chen Wei nodded politely, but his eyes remained expressionless like polished stones. Then he spoke, his deep voice filling the room with syllables that rose and fell like waves. Sarah blinked. "He says that he is impressed with the growth numbers." In the hallway, sitting against the wall with her headphones on, Lucy raised her head. Even through the thick door, the words in Mandarin filtered through to her with enough clarity. She frowned. That was not what Mr. Chen had said. He had asked, "How do you guarantee the security of personal data in your training models?" The tone was not one of admiration, but of professional scrutiny, of someone who has seen too many companies promise ethics and deliver surveillance in disguise. Lucy took off one headphone, her heart accelerating for no apparent reason. Something was not right. Inside the room, Jack continued his presentation with the confidence of someone who has told the same story so many times that he no longer distinguishes between truth and sales narrative. He spoke of privacy by design, of rigorous compliance, of independent audits. Sarah translated with speed, but each time she took more shortcuts. Complex sentences became simplified summaries, legal details disappeared, and the worst, she began to soften Mr. Chen's sharp questions, turning them into neutral comments to avoid tension. Chen Wei leaned forward, his fingers interlaced on the table. He asked a long technical question, loaded with specific terms about encryption and data anonymization. Sarah hesitated visibly. He asks about the general security protocols. Mark looked at Jack with growing alarm. That sounded too vague for someone like Chen Wei, known for dissecting every word of a contract like a surgeon. Jack, unaware of the danger, launched his star answer, the one he had used in 3 interviews with the economic press, the one that sounded impressive but said little. "We use our users' data exclusively to improve the product experience, always with consent and total control on their part." Sarah translated, but on the path between languages, something crucial was lost. Or worse, it was transformed. The word improve became something that sounded dangerously close to monetize. The sentence about consent lost its emphasis, and total control sounded in Mandarin like a hollow guarantee, the kind that big companies had used before selling millions of profiles to third parties. Chen Wei's face hardened imperceptibly. Mrs. Zhou wrote something on her tablet with sharp strokes of the stylus. Lin, the assistant, whispered something in his boss's ear. Lucy in the hallway felt a knot in her stomach. She stood up slowly, putting her tablet in her backpack. Her mother was 2 floors down, cleaning the executive bathrooms. There was no one around, only she and the growing certainty that something terrible was about to happen. Jack moved toward the most delicate section of the presentation, the use of data to train new AI models. It was here where the line between innovation and exploitation became dangerously thin, where every word mattered, where precision was not optional, but vital. Our business model includes the analysis of usage patterns to develop more precise algorithms, he explained, gesturing with his hands. Everything within the legal framework, of course. Data is anonymized before processing, and we never share identifiable information with third parties. Sarah swallowed hard. The technical term for anonymization escaped her. She improvised with a more general, more vague word. And in the translation, "we never share" was transformed into something ambiguous, something that could be interpreted as "we share under certain conditions." It was like throwing a lit match into a puddle of gasoline. Chen Wei stood up abruptly, pushing his chair back with a harsh sound that cut the air. He spoke in fast Mandarin, his voice maintaining formal courtesy, but loaded with disappointment and something more dangerous: distrust. 我们不能与一个不尊重数据隐私的公司合作，这是不诚实的。We cannot work with a company that does not respect data privacy. This is dishonest. Sarah turned pale until she looked translucent. He says that he appreciates your time, but... Her voice broke. They must leave. What? Jack stood up suddenly, his smile disintegrating. What does that mean? There are misunderstandings about the use of data. He believes that... I explained it perfectly. Jack's voice rose in volume, losing all executive composure. This is absurd. Chen Wei was already picking up his briefcase. Mrs. Zhou closed her tablet with a definitive click. Lin whispered in Mandarin something about waste of time and lack of transparency. Mark tried to intervene, but the damage was done. $200 million were walking toward the door, and with them the future of Vance Tech. It was then that Lucy heard the word that made her whole body tense: Bu Cheng Shide, dishonest. She knew it was not true. She had followed enough conferences about Vance Tech. She had seen the public audits. She had read the compliance documents that the company published online. Jack Vance could be arrogant. He could be blind to people who had no power. But in this, in data protection, his company was rigorous because he knew it was his only real advantage against the American giants. The problem was not the truth. It was the translation, and she was the only person in that entire building who could fix it. Lucy's heart was beating so hard, she was sure it echoed through the hallway. Her legs did not want to move. Fear. That old friend that had lived with her since she was old enough to understand that the world had closed doors for girls like her, squeezed her chest like a fist. Who was she to go in there? A 12-year-old girl with patched jeans and a broken tablet. The daughter of the cleaning lady. Invisible. Insignificant. But then she remembered something her mother had told her once, on one of those nights when the money wasn't enough even for the bus, and they walked home in the rain. My love, being invisible does not mean you don't exist. Sometimes it means you can see things that others don't see. Lucy had seen, she had understood, and if she did nothing, if she let those men leave believing a lie, dozens, maybe hundreds of people would lose their jobs. Her mother could lose hers. And all because of a poorly built bridge of words. She breathed deeply. Once, twice, 3 times. Then she opened the door. The scene unfolding in front of her seemed frozen in amber. Jack standing by the table, his face red with frustration and helplessness. Sarah with tears starting to form in her eyes, knowing she had failed but not understanding exactly how. Mark with his hands on his head, mentally calculating how many people they would have to fire. Tan Chen Wei, already with his hand on the doorknob, stopped only because Chinese courtesy did not allow leaving without a formal goodbye. Chen Xiansheng, Qingdang Yisha. Mr. Chen, please wait a moment. Lucy's voice went through the room like a stone goes through water, clear, firm, and in perfect Mandarin. Everyone turned toward her. Jack recognized her, and his expression went from shock to fury. What the hell? Lucy, get out of here immediately. But Chen Wei raised a hand, cutting Jack's words in the air. His eyes, which moments before had been hard as jade, now showed genuine curiosity. Dung dung. Wait. He turned completely toward Lucy, studying her with the intensity of someone who has lived long enough to know that the biggest surprises come in the most unexpected packages. He said something in Mandarin, fast, technical, a test. Ni shi shui? Ni zeme hui shuo zhongwen? Who are you? How is it that you speak Chinese? Lucy felt her knees shaking, but she kept her voice firm. She answered in Mandarin, with the precise tones she had practiced 1,000 times in front of her broken screen. 我叫 Lucia， 我自学了3年中文，我妈妈在这里工作。My name is Lucy. I studied Chinese on my own for 3 years. My mother works here. Chen Wei exchanged a look with Lin, his assistant. The young man seemed genuinely impressed. 他的发音非常准确. Her pronunciation is very precise. Sarah watched the scene with a mixture of relief and humiliation. Jack was paralyzed, caught between the rage that a child had interrupted his most important meeting and the desperate hope that, in some impossible way, this could save him. Lucy turned toward Jack, now in English, with a maturity that should not exist in someone her age. Mr. Vance, there are errors in the translation. Mr. Chen is not upset because of what you said, but because of how it was translated. He believes the company sells personal data because the word for improve sounded like monetize, and total control sounded like a hollow promise. Jack's face went from red to white in 2 seconds. Good God. Sarah, is that true? Sarah covered her face with her hands, nodding through silent sobs. Lucy continued, now looking directly at Chen Wei. 对不起打扰, Chen 先生. 翻译确实有误. Sorry for the interruption, Mr. Chen. The translation had errors. And then, with a clarity that came from whole nights watching documentaries about data protection, about ethics in AI, about the most complex debates of the digital future, Lucy began to explain. She spoke of real anonymization, not superficial. Of informed consent, not camouflaged in terms and conditions that nobody reads. Of independent audits conducted by certified Western companies. Of how Vance Tech had been fined the previous year precisely for being too strict with its internal policies, rejecting a lucrative contract because it compromised user privacy. Chen Wei listened to her without interrupting, asking technical questions that he would have asked an experienced executive. And Lucy answered, not with the arrogance of someone who wants to impress, but with the humility of someone who simply knows. She spoke of how the company used differential privacy, a concept that not even Sarah knew, of how data never left secure servers, of how every user could request the complete deletion of their information at any time without hidden penalties. Mrs. Zhou put down her tablet and began to take notes on paper, something she only did when something really interested her. Lin translated fragments in a low voice to Chen Wei, although the man seemed to understand every word Lucy said. 你怎么知道这些技术细节? How do you know these technical details? Chen Wei asked, genuinely curious. 我看了很多关于人工智能伦理的讲座和纪录片。我想了解未来。I have watched many lectures and documentaries about artificial intelligence ethics. I want to understand the future. Something changed in Chen Wei's face, a softness that had not been there before. And how old are you? 12 years old, sir. A dense silence filled the room. Chen Wei looked at Jack, then at the door where Mary had surely passed with her cleaning cart, then back to Lucy. A 12-year-old girl who studies alone understands more about our concerns than the professional interpreter you hired. It was not a reproach. It was an observation, almost philosophical. Jack found his voice, shaky but sincere. Lucy, could you help us? Could you translate correctly? She nodded, although her whole body vibrated with nerves. During the next 20 minutes, Lucy became the bridge that Sarah had not been able to be. She translated every one of Jack's sentences with surgical precision, without decorating, without softening. When Chen Wei asked difficult questions about edge cases, what would happen if a government requested data? How did they guarantee that dishonest employees did not access sensitive information? Lucy transmitted every word without filters. And when Jack gave solid answers that showed that his company really took ethics seriously, Lucy translated them with the same neutrality. She did not invent praise. She did not sugarcoat criticism. She simply built a firm bridge where before there had only been a shaky path. Chen Wei asked his final question, the one that really mattered. 如果我们投资，你们会保持这些标准，即使在压力下。If we invest, will you maintain these standards even under pressure? Jack breathed deeply before answering, knowing that everything depended on this answer. Yes, because if we lose them, we will lose the only thing that differentiates us from the tech giants. Our word is the only thing that really counts, Lucy translated. Chen Wei looked at his colleagues. Mrs. Zhou nodded almost imperceptibly. Lin raised his eyebrows, impressed. Then Chen Wei smiled. A small smile, but real. 这个孩子比许多成年人更有智慧. This child has more wisdom than many adults. He turned toward Jack with renewed consideration. A company that listens to the truth even when it comes from someone everyone ignored is a company that deserves trust. We will review the contract tonight. Tomorrow, we will sign. The room exploded in a collective sigh of relief. Mark had to sit down, his legs turned into jelly. Sarah was crying openly, although she no longer knew if from shame or relief. Jack walked toward Lucy, and to everyone's surprise, including his own, he knelt down to be at her height. Lucy, you just saved my company. How can I thank you? She looked at him without challenge or submission, only with a simple truth that she had lived every day of her life. You don't need to thank me, sir. I just didn't want everyone to lose because of a misunderstanding. And she swallowed hard. Sometimes one is invisible but still understands everything. Chen Wei, who was listening although he pretended to check his phone, said in slow but clear English, "The invisible ones sometimes see better than those who have all the lights on them." Mary came up from the 38th floor with her heart hitting her ribs. Someone from security had called her on the radio. "Your daughter is in the meeting room on the 40th. The panic had been instant, total. What had Lucy done? Were they going to fire her? How would they pay the rent? When she arrived, panting, she found a scene that did not fit in any of her nightmares. Lucy standing next to men in suits worth thousands of dollars, talking to them as if it were normal, as if she belonged there. "What happened, Hon?" she whispered, taking her daughter by the arm gently but with urgency. Jack approached, and Mary prepared for the words that would end her employment. But what came was completely different. "Mary, your daughter," Jack's voice broke slightly, "saved the most important investment of my life. She translated when our interpreter failed. She understood things that I myself had not explained well." Mary looked at Lucy, then at Jack, then at the Chinese investors who were nodding with genuine respect. "I don't understand," Chen Wei approached and said in careful English, "Your daughter speaks my language better than many professionals, and more important, she understands honor. That is not taught in expensive schools. It was too much. 15 years of holding back emotions, of being strong because there was no option, of seeing her daughter be invisible in a world that only looked at those who shined with other people's money." Everything collapsed at once. Mary cried. Right there, in front of executives and millionaires, she cried with the broken sound of someone who can finally breathe after drowning for years. Lucy hugged her, small but firm. "It's okay, Mum. Everything is okay." Jack cleared his throat, uncomfortable with such raw emotions in his temple of glass and steel. "Mary, take the rest of the day off, with pay. And tomorrow I want to talk to you and Lucy, in my office. There are things I need to fix." That night in their 2-bedroom apartment in Queens, where the noise of the subway vibrated the walls every 10 minutes, Mary and Lucy sat on the worn sofa they had bought third hand. "Do you really speak Chinese that well?" Mary still could not process everything. "I have been studying for 3 years, Mum. I didn't tell you because—" Lucy looked at her hands. "Because I knew you would feel bad for not being able to pay for classes." Mary closed her eyes, a new wave of maternal pain going through her. "My love, it is not your fault. It was never your fault." Lucy took her mother's rough hand. "And look, I did it alone. That means I am worth something, right?" "You are worth everything, my dear. The whole world." They stayed like that, hugged in their small refuge from the world, not knowing that on the other side of the city, in a penthouse with views that cost more than their entire building, Jack Vance could not sleep. He kept seeing Lucy's face, the dignity in her eyes despite the patched uniform, the intelligence that he had passed by as if it were part of the furniture. How many talents had he ignored in 15 years of building his empire? How many brilliant people cleaned his offices, served his coffee, emptied his trash cans, invisible because society had decided that their zip code defined their value? He poured himself a whiskey that cost $200 a bottle and knew it would not give him answers. Jack Vance's office occupied an entire corner of the 42nd floor, with windows that framed New York like a postcard of power. Mary entered with Lucy, both in their best clothes, which were still modest but perfect, and with that tension of someone who expects the other shoe to drop. Jack was different. No tie, sleeves rolled up. He seemed to have slept little and thought a lot. "Sit down, please." They did, in designer chairs that probably cost more than a month of rent. "I have been thinking all night," Jack began, going straight to the point. "What happened yesterday made me see things I should have seen years ago." Mary squeezed Lucy's hand under the table. "Lucy, I want to offer you a full scholarship for the International School of New York. English, Chinese, the best facilities. We will also cover transportation, materials, everything." The silence that followed was so dense it could be touched. Lucy looked at her mother, searching for permission to believe in something so impossible. "Why?" Mary asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Because yesterday, a 12-year-old girl saved my company. Because she has a talent that would be wasted in a system that ignores her. And because," Jack rubbed his face, "because I have spent years preaching about ethical artificial intelligence while I was completely blind to the human intelligence I had in front of me." "Mr. Vance," Mary was shaking. "And there is more. Mary, I want to offer you a position as supervisor of the service team. Better salary, normal hours, benefits. Lucy needs her mother at home in the afternoons, not cleaning offices until midnight." Mary broke into tears for the second time in 24 hours. But these tears were different. They were the kind that washes away years of silent humiliation, of nights of aching knees, of seeing your daughter do homework under fluorescent lights while you wait for your shift to end. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes." Jack smiled, and for the first time he seemed sincere. "And Lucy, if we ever need to translate something into Chinese, we will hire you, as a professional, with a contract and everything." Lucy found her voice firm despite the tears that also began to fall. "Thank you, sir. But can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Miss Sarah, the interpreter, don't fire her. She was nervous and made mistakes, but we all deserve second opportunities, right?" Jack looked at her with something like amazement. "You are really special, do you know that?" "I am not special. I just know what it is like to be judged before being given the chance to prove it. And so, in that office where decisions that moved millions were made, a girl who the world had decided was invisible taught a powerful man the simplest and most forgotten lesson, that human value is not measured in last names or zip codes, but in the quality of the heart that beats under all the clothes, expensive or cheap. The International School of New York looked like it was taken from a movie. Perfect soccer fields, labs with technology Lucy had only seen in videos, libraries with thousands of books in 10 different languages, and students who arrived in cars with drivers, with backpacks that cost more than Lucy's old tablet. The first day was brutal. Lucy sat alone in the cafeteria, her tray with food she didn't recognize in front of her. Around her, kids her age talked about vacations in Bali, new iPhones, private concerts. She ate in silence, invisible again, but in a different way. Now she was visible as the scholarship girl, the one who came from Queens, the one who had no history of previous private schools. "Is it true that your mother cleaned bathrooms?" The voice came from Charlotte, a girl with perfect blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Lucy looked up. 3 girls surrounded her, curious like scientists observing a rare specimen. "Yes, and she did it better than anyone." "And you speak Chinese?" Another girl, Sophie, with an accent that suggested summers in France. "Ni xiang rang wo zheng ming ma?" "Do you want me to prove it?" The girls blinked, impressed despite themselves. Charlotte tried to recover her social power position. "Well, we speak several languages here. It is not that special." "You are right." Lucy smiled without poison. "I am not special, I am just new. Like everyone was once." It was such a disarming response, so free of defense or attack, that the girls didn't know how to continue. They left confused, like predators discovering that their prey does not run or fight, it simply exists with dignity. That night, Lucy called her mother from her new phone, part of the scholarship package, something that still felt unreal to her. "How was it, my love?" "Different. But it is okay." Lucy looked out the window of her room, still in the same apartment in Queens, but somehow everything had changed. "Mom, do you think I deserve to be there?" Mary felt her heart break a little. "My dear, you deserve to be wherever your intelligence and your heart take you. Don't let anyone make you feel less. And if I fail? Then you will have tried, which is more than many do." Mary paused. "Lucy, do you know what amazes me the most? It is not that you speak Chinese. It is that after everything, after seeing how the world treated people like us, you still have the generosity to defend Sarah. You still think about others. I learned from you, Mom. Then I taught you the only thing that matters." 3 months later, the advanced Mandarin teacher, Mr. Wang, originally from Beijing, announced a special test. A representative from the Cultural Institute would come to evaluate the course level. The best students could qualify for a summer exchange in China. Charlotte practiced with her private tutor 3 times a week. Sophie had lived for 2 years in Shanghai. The other students had access to resources Lucy didn't even know existed. But Lucy had something different. 3 years of pure obsession, of learning because she loved the language, not because it would look good on a future university resume. The day of the exam, the evaluator, Dr. Lee, a 50-year-old woman with eyes that had seen thousands of students pretend knowledge, began with basic questions. Too easy for an advanced course. Charlotte answered with memorized fluency, perfect but without soul. Sophie showed practical mastery, elevated survival phrases. Each student passed, each one showing technical competence. Then it was Lucy's turn. Dr. Lee studied her with particular attention. She had read her file. The girl who had learned alone the story of the meeting room that already circulated like an urban legend in education circles. "Ni wei shimao xue zhongwen?" Why do you study Chinese? It was the trick question. The easy answer. For my future, for the opportunities, because it is useful. But Lucy answered with truth. 因为我想了解一个我永远无法访问的世界，语言是穷人的护照。Because I wanted to understand a world that I could never access. Language is the passport of the poor. Dr. Lee leaned forward. Jishu. Continue. When you don't have money to travel, you learn the language. When you can't buy experiences, you create them in your mind. Chinese took me to lectures on AI ethics, to debates on privacy, to a future that my zip code said did not belong to me. It taught me that access does not come only from opening doors, but from building windows. Absolute silence in the class. Even Charlotte had forgotten her pose of superiority. Doctor, Lai changed to a complex technical topic, terminology about blockchain applied to smart contracts. Lucy handled it, then regional dialects. Lucy explained the differences between standard Mandarin and Cantonese, between the pronunciation of Beijing and that of Taiwan. Finally, Dr. Lee smiled. In 30 years evaluating students, I rarely find someone who understands that a language is not a tool, but a bridge toward empathy. She looked at the whole class. Most of you speak Chinese. This student thinks in Chinese there is a difference. After class, Charlotte approached Lucy with an expression that fought between wounded pride and grudgingly earned respect. You are annoyingly good at this. I had good teachers. Lucy pointed to her old tablet, still kept in her new backpack like a charm. YouTube and desperation. Charlotte laughed, despite herself. Maybe I judged you wrong. Maybe we all judge wrong until we decide to really see. It was the beginning of something new. Not exactly friendship yet, but the recognition of shared humanity. Small bridges being built, where before there were only abysses of prejudice. One Saturday afternoon, Mary was organizing her small living room when the doorbell rang. They were not expecting anyone. She opened with caution and almost fell from the shock. Chen Wei was at her door, in a suit less formal than the one at the meeting but equally elegant, and in his hands he carried a box of Chinese tea wrapped in silk paper. Miss Silver, I hope I am not intruding. Is Lucy here? Mary let him in, nervous, apologizing for the old sofa, for the walls that needed paint, for everything. Her home was not compared to the spaces where men like Chen Wei lived. Please, do not apologize. Chen Wei looked around with genuine interest. A home is measured by the love in it, not by the price of the furniture. Lucy came out of her room surprised. Mr. Chen, I came to bring you something. He handed her the box. Tea from my home province, but more importantly, I came to make you a proposal. They sat down, the three of them, in that small space that suddenly seemed to contain something huge. My company has a mentorship program for young people with exceptional talent. It is not just about languages. It is about understanding how the world of international business, technology, and diplomacy works. Chen Wei looked at Lucy with seriousness. Normally, we only accept university students, but I would like to make an exception with you. Me, but I am only 12. And at 12 you understood something that 50-year-old executives don't understand, that truth builds stronger bridges than money. He turned toward Mary. It would be virtual at first, 1 hour a week in Mandarin. When she is 16, if she is still interested, she could come to Shanghai for a summer. Everything with expenses covered. Mary felt like she was dreaming. These things did not happen to families like theirs. They did not happen to women who cleaned bathrooms and raised daughters alone. Mr. Chen, I don't know what to say. Say yes. His smile was warm. The world needs more people like your daughter. People who choose honesty when lying would be easier. People who see others, even when nobody sees them. Lucy looked at her mother, searching for approval. Mary had tears in her eyes again, but she nodded. Then yes. Thank you. That night, after Chen Wei left, Mary hugged her daughter on the worn sofa that now felt like a throne. Your life is going to be different than mine, my love. Not better, just different. Lucy squeezed her mother's hand. Everything I am comes from you. From watching you get up every day, even though it was hard. From watching you treat us with dignity despite how others treated you. I only did what any mother would do. No. You did what the best mothers do. You taught me that value does not come from the outside, but from within. Advanced tech, things were also changing. Jack had hired a diversity and inclusion consultant, not as an empty gesture, but because he had painfully understood how much talent he had been wasting. They implemented a program where every employee, regardless of their position, could suggest improvements. Ideas no longer needed to come from the top, and so they discovered that Rose, from cleaning, had a perfect system for organizing inventory. That Mike, the night guard, programmed as a hobby, and had detected 3 security vulnerabilities that the experts had overlooked. Jack invited Lucy to give a talk for the company. At first, she refused. I am not inspiring. I was just myself. Exactly, answered Jack. That is what they need to hear. The day of the talk, the auditorium was full. Employees from all levels, from senior developers to service staff. Lucy went up on stage in jeans and a simple shirt, without pretension. "They asked me to speak about overcoming obstacles," she began, her voice shaking only a little. "But I believe that is not the right story. Because obstacles should not exist in the first place." She paused, finding courage. "The real problem is not that a poor girl learns Chinese alone. The problem is that we live in a world where that is considered exceptional instead of being simply possible for everyone. The real problem is not that my mother worked at night while I did homework in cold hallways. The problem is a system that does not value the work that sustains everything else." The room was in absolute silence. I am not here to inspire you with my story of overcoming. I am here to ask you to look at the invisible people in your lives, to the one who serves your coffee, to the one who cleans your office, to the one who guards while you sleep, and ask yourselves, what talent am I ignoring? What story will I never hear because I decided that someone's uniform defines their value? My mother is the smartest person I know, not because she speaks languages or knows about technology, but because she understands something deeper, that we all deserve dignity. That honest work has no moral hierarchy, that cleaning a bathroom with excellence is worth as much as programming code with excellence. Her eyes found her mother, sitting in the last row, crying with pride. So don't celebrate me. Celebrate all the people who work in the shadows so others can shine, and then do something radical. See them, talk to them, listen to them. Because the next Chen Wei, the next innovator, the next genius who will change the world, could be pushing a cleaning cart right now, invisible to all of you. The ovation was deafening. But the most important thing happened later. Real conversations began. Human connections that crossed the artificial lines of the corporate org chart. Mark, the operations director, invited several of the cleaning staff to coffee. He discovered that Carmen had been an accountant in South America. In a month, she was working in the finance department. He discovered that Ahmed had studied engineering. Now he helped debug code. The change was not perfect. There was resistance, skepticism, people who thought it was just corporate theater. But something had moved like a stone thrown into a still pond, creating ripples that expanded. 6 months after that day that changed everything, the real test arrived. Vance Tech received a purchase offer from Tech Global, an American giant. $500 million. Jack would be rich beyond his dreams, but there was a condition. Tech Global wanted to optimize operations, a corporate euphemism for firing half the staff. Jack had a week to decide. Lucy found him in his office one afternoon, looking out the window with a lost expression. She had come to drop off some documents she had translated as part of her freelance work for the company. "Mr. Vance, are you okay?" He turned, surprised to see her. "Lucy," he sighed heavily, "can I ask you something? As a friend." She nodded, sitting in one of the chairs in front of his desk. "If you had to choose between being very rich or being a good person, what would you choose?" "Why do I have to choose? Can't I be both?" "Sometimes no. Sometimes money requires sacrificing people." He told her about the offer, about the layoffs, about the pressure from his investors to accept. Lucy listened in silence, processing. Then she spoke with the clarity of someone who has lived on the other side of decisions like these. "My mother was fired twice in her life for optimizations. Both times, the executives who signed those papers went home in expensive cars and slept well. She went home on the bus crying, wondering how she would feed me." Jack shrank in his chair. "So you think I should not sell?" "I think you already know the answer. That is why you are asking me instead of your advisors." Lucy looked him straight in the eyes. "Mr. Vance, 6 months ago you saw me for the first time. I was always there, but you chose to see me that day. You chose to change. That choice is worth more than 500 million. But it is so much money. And what will you buy with it? More things you don't need? Respect from people who don't matter?" Lucy leaned forward. "Or you can stay and build a company that proves that capitalism doesn't have to be cruel. That success doesn't require stepping on others. It would be harder, yes, but it would be worth more." Jack stayed looking at that girl, no longer such a girl, growing before his eyes, who spoke with more wisdom than all his mentors. How did you become so wise? I am not wise. I just know pain. And I decided that when I had power, I would never use it to cause that pain to others. 3 days later, Jack rejected the Tech Global offer. His investors protested. Some sold their shares. Business magazines called him naive, idealistic, a bad strategist. But when he announced his decision to the entire company, explaining that he preferred to grow slow but with values than to do it fast over the bodies of fired people, the applause was genuine. For the first time in his life, Jack Vance felt something better than success. He felt real respect. And that night, when he saw the news and a commentator called him a fool for rejecting so much money, Jack smiled. Because he knew something the commentator didn't, that you sleep better, knowing that nobody lost their job for your 5th vacation home. A year after the day that changed everything, an unexpected invitation arrived. Lucy had been nominated for the Young Cultural Ambassador Award, a recognition that normally went to university students from diplomatic families. The ceremony would be at a grand hall. There would be press, government officials, and the Chinese ambassador in person. Mary almost fainted reading the invitation. "My love, this is a grand hall." "I know." Lucy was also nervous. "Will you come with me?" "Me? But You are the reason I am being honored. Without you, I would be nothing." Mary cried as she had cried so many times that year, but these were different tears. They were the kind of tears that fall when you see that the sacrifice was worth it, that the nights without sleep, the aching knees, the postponed dreams, everything led to this moment, where your daughter shines not despite you, but because of you. The day of the ceremony, they dressed in the best clothes they could find. It was not high fashion, but it was perfect, ironed with love, chosen with dignity. When they arrived, Mary felt the looks from other attendees evaluating, judging their second-hand shoes, their purse bought at a market. But Lucy walked with her head high, her hand firmly held by her mother's. "You are the most elegant person here," she whispered to Mary, "because true elegance comes from within." The ceremony was formal, full of speeches in 3 languages, decorations delivered with diplomatic pomp. Lucy received her medal from the hands of the ambassador, who spoke in Mandarin about how she represented the future of relations between cultures. In her acceptance speech, Lucy spoke in English first, then in Mandarin, her words flowing naturally between worlds. "This honor is not just mine. It belongs to all the children who learn in silence, who study under poor lights, who dream of worlds that seem forbidden to them. It belongs to mothers like mine who work tirelessly so that their children have opportunities they never had." Her voice broke slightly. "A year ago, I was invisible. I pushed a cart next to my mother through hallways where nobody saw us. But invisibility taught me to see others. It taught me that the most important people are not the ones with big titles, but the ones who do small things with greatness." Mary was crying openly in her seat. Next to her, Jack Vance, special guest, also had wet eyes. "So I accept this award not as a personal achievement, but as a reminder. Look at the invisible ones. Listen to the quiet ones. Because the next bridge between cultures, the next innovator, the next leader, could be cleaning your office right now, waiting for someone to finally see them." The ovation was long, real, without the forced courtesy of other diplomatic speeches, because Lucy had touched something universal. The human need to be seen, to matter, to have dignity regardless of your zip code. After the ceremony, at the cocktail party, where waiters in white gloves served appetizers that cost more than a complete meal in Queens, the Chinese ambassador approached Mary. "Miss Silver, your daughter is extraordinary." Mary, nervous among so much power and money, found her voice. "She is my whole world." "It shows, because only love can create that kind of strength." The ambassador smiled. "You know, I come from a poor village. My mother sold vegetables in the market. When I received my first diplomatic post, she cried, just as you cried today." Mary looked at him, surprised to find a mirror of her own story. "And what did you say to her?" "I told her that everything I was because of her. That there is no higher title than that of a mother who sacrifices everything for her children. He paused. I repeat it to you now. You did something harder than learning languages or building companies. You raised a daughter with values in a world that values money. That is true success. That night, back in their apartment in Queens, Mary and Lucy sat on their worn sofa, which they could now replace but had decided to keep as a reminder of where they came from. Everything changed so fast, Mary murmured. Not everything. Lucy rested her head on her mother's shoulder. The important thing stays the same. You and me together. Always, my love. Always. 2 years passed like pages turned by a soft wind. Lucy, now 14 years old, was a prominent student not only in languages but in technology. Her end-of-year project was to develop a free language learning app specifically designed for low-income children, with a simple interface that worked on old phones and consumed little data. Chen Wei flew in for the presentation of the project. He sat in the front row next to Mary, who now supervised not only the cleaning team at Vance Tech, but also the new professional development program for employees without university degrees. When Lucy explained her app, her passion was evident. Education should not depend on money. A child in a poor neighborhood has the same right to learn Mandarin as a child in a rich area. This app uses ethical artificial intelligence. She looked significantly at Jack, who was also present, to adapt lessons to the individual level without collecting invasive data. The project won first place, but more importantly, an educational foundation offered to finance its full development for national distribution. After the ceremony, the group, Chen Wei, Mary, Jack, and Lucy, went to eat at a modest Chinese restaurant, not one of the expensive places downtown. It was Lucy's idea. The best dumplings are not in white tablecloth restaurants, she explained. They are where the people who really make them with love eat. Chen Wei laughed, delighted. Every time you remind me more of my mother, she used to say, expensive food fills the stomach. Food with soul fills the heart. During the meal, between shared plates and genuine laughter, Chen Wei made an announcement. Lucy, my company wants to be your first official investor. Not for charity, but because your app will solve a real problem. We will invest $100,000 to start. Lucy dropped her chopsticks. Mr. Chen, I am only 14, and I started my first company at 16. Age only matters for people without vision. He turned toward Mary. With your permission, of course, it will be a trust until Lucy is 18. Mary looked at her daughter, saw the light in her eyes, the dream becoming tangible. Is this what you want, my dear? I want other children to not have to wait for someone to see them. I want them to be able to learn, grow, dream, regardless of where they were born. Then yes. Mary squeezed her daughter's hand. Always yes to your dreams. Jack, who had been watching in silence, finally spoke. Vance Tech also wants to invest. And not just money. We want to provide the infrastructure, the servers, the technical support. He paused. 2 years ago, a girl saved my company. Now I want to help save the dreams of thousands of children. Lucy felt the tears forming, not from sadness but from overwhelming gratitude. I don't know how to thank you all. You already did, answered Chen Wei. You taught us to see differently, to value differently, to understand that true capital is not in banks but in the human potential we discard through social blindness. The restaurant around them hummed with life, families sharing meals, children laughing, the universal sound of humanity connecting over food and conversation. And at that table, 4 people from completely different worlds, a business tycoon, a former cleaning employee, a CEO, and a brilliant teenager, proved that the strongest bridges are built with mutual respect and recognition of shared value. Lucy's app, called simply Bridge, Puente in Spanish, Qiao in Chinese, was launched a year later. In the first 6 months, it had 500,000 downloads. Letters arrived from all parts of the country, children from small towns learning English, immigrant teenagers perfecting Spanish, seniors challenging the idea that they were too old to learn. One letter in particular touched Lucy's heart. It was from a 9-year-old girl. Thank you for making an app for old phones. My mum cleans houses, and she cannot buy me an iPhone. But with your app, I am learning French. Someday I will be a translator like you. I no longer feel silly for having an old phone. Lucy read that letter aloud during an interview with a national newspaper. The journalist, expecting a Silicon Valley-type youth entrepreneur story, found something deeper. "What is your long-term vision?" he asked. "That no child has to feel silly for not having resources. That access to quality education does not depend on your parents' salary. That being poor does not mean being invisible." You talk as if you have personal experience with that. I do. 3 years ago, I was that girl with the old phone, studying in cold hallways while Mom worked. The only difference between me and millions of other children is that I had a moment of luck. Someone finally saw me. Jack Vance? Not just him. Mr. Chen Wei, who treated my knowledge with respect despite my age. My mother, who never made me feel that we were less because we had less. And all the invisible people I have met who taught me that human value has no market price. The interview went viral, not because of sensationalism, but because it touched something everyone felt but few expressed: the tiredness of a society that measured value in bank zeros instead of quality of character. Vance Tech experienced an unexpected boom. It turns out that clients wanted to work with ethical companies, companies that proved that capitalism could have a soul. Employees were more committed, more creative, more loyal. Productivity rose 30% not by pressure, but by purpose. Other companies began to copy the model: development programs for staff without degrees, policies of seeing all employees as potential sources of innovation, not just those with degrees from expensive schools. And in the center of it all, Lucy continued to be Lucy. She still lived in the same neighborhood. She still took the subway. She still helped her mother with the shopping every Saturday. Because she had learned the most important lesson: success that changes you so much that you forget where you come from is not true success. It is just another way to get lost. 5 years passed since that day in the meeting room on the 40th floor. Vance Tech organized a special event, the anniversary of its inclusion program. They had transformed the lobby into an exhibition space where employees from all levels showed projects, innovations, ideas that had been born from minds previously considered only support staff. Lucy, now 17 years old and about to graduate with honors, was invited as the keynote speaker. But she asked for something unusual, that her mother speak first. Mary went up on stage, shaking. She had never spoken in front of more than 5 people at a time. The auditorium was full with 300. I am not good at speeches," she began, her voice soft but clear. "I only know how to clean, or at least, that is what I thought." She paused, looking for words she had been carrying for years. "When your work is invisible, you start to feel like you are too. I cleaned offices where decisions were made that affected thousands of lives, and nobody knew my name. I emptied trash cans full of ideas that were worth millions, while I counted coins for the bus." Her voice became firmer. "But my daughter taught me something, that I was never invisible. I was just surrounded by people who had forgotten how to see, and the day someone finally looked, really looked, everything changed. Not because I changed, but because the look changed." Mary looked directly at Jack, who was in the front row. "Mr. Vance, you gave me an opportunity. But more importantly, you gave an opportunity to your own humanity. You chose to see. You chose to change. And that choice created ripples that are still expanding." She pointed to the audience, where employees from all departments, some in suits, others in work uniforms, sat together without artificial hierarchies. "Look around. This is the proof that when you value people for who they are, not for what they have, everyone wins. The company grows, families prosper, and maybe, just maybe, we build a world a little bit less cruel." The ovation was thunderous. Jack stood up first, tears running down his face without shame. Then the whole room, a recognition not only of Mary, but of all those who had been invisible and were finally seen. Lucy went up on stage and hugged her mother. When the noise calmed down, she spoke with the voice of someone who has lived enough truth to understand what really matters. "My mother says that I taught her something, but the truth is the other way around. She taught me everything that matters: dignity in adversity, generosity even when you have little, love that does not depend on external circumstances." She looked at the audience, her gaze encompassing everyone. 5 years ago, I entered a room where I did not belong, or at least that is what I thought. I was terrified. I was just a girl with patched clothes in a palace of glass and ambition. But I spoke because I saw an injustice. Good people losing opportunities because of misunderstandings. What I didn't know then is that that moment was not about saving an investment. It was about proving a simple truth that this society had forgotten, that real value is not in the position you hold, but in the heart you carry. Her voice softened, loaded with emotion. All of you, she pointed to the employees, have that value. The one who cleans with excellence is worth as much as the one who programs with excellence. The one who handles security is worth as much as the one who negotiates contracts, because a company, a society, a world only works when we recognize that every piece matters. Chen Wei, connected by video, appeared on the giant screen behind her. Lucy is right, his voice echoed in the auditorium. We say, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. But it is false. Her chain is only as strong as the respect between its links. Vance Tech proves that capitalism with a conscience is not weakness. It is the only sustainable form of future. Jack took the microphone, his voice loaded with everything he had learned. 5 years ago, I almost lost my company because of blindness. I didn't see a brilliant girl because I was too busy seeing only people who looked like me. Since then, I have learned the most expensive lesson of my life, that ignoring talent because of prejudice is not only morally wrong, it is stupid from any point of view. He paused, letting his words resonate. That is why I announced today that Vance Tech will establish a $50 million fund for scholarships, specifically aimed at low-income students with exceptional talent. Because the next genius who changes the world should not be lost because their parents cannot pay for an expensive school. The applause this time was different, not just celebration, but recognition that they were witnessing a real change, not a cosmetic one. Lucy concluded with simple words that carried the weight of her lived experience. I don't know what the future holds for me, if I will build big or small companies, if I will change the world, or only my small corner of it. But I know this. I will never forget what it feels like to be invisible, and I will use every drop of privilege I have gained to make sure that others don't have to wait years to be seen. Because in the end, that is the only measure that matters. Not how much you accumulated, but how many people you helped to shine. Not how high you climbed, but how many you took with you. Not how successful you were, but how human you remained on the way. She looked at her mother, at Jack, at Chen Wei on the screen, at all the faces in the audience. So thank you. Not for seeing me specifically, but for learning to see, for choosing humanity over hierarchy, for proving that true value is not in the position, but in the heart. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that precedes something deep. Then, slowly, beginning with Mary and spreading through the whole room, people stood up, not applauding this time, but simply standing, a silent recognition that they had been witnesses to something bigger than a corporate speech. They had seen the truth expressed with clarity, that we all carry value inside, waiting to be recognized. That invisibility is not a permanent condition, but a collective choice we can change. That the future does not belong to those who have the most, but to those who see best. That night, Mary and Lucy walked through the streets of Queens, their neighborhood, their home. The same streets where they had walked years ago, counting coins for the bus, dreaming of better days. Do you regret anything, Mum? Asked Lucy. Mary stopped, looking at her daughter under the dim light of the street lamps. Nothing, my love, because every difficulty brought us here, and here is perfect. Even when it was hard? Especially when it was hard, because the difficulty taught me strength, and that strength I gave to you. Lucy hugged her mother in the middle of the street, two figures under a city starry sky, invisible to the cars passing by, but completely visible to each other. And in that embrace was all the truth that the world needed to learn, that true value is not in what you have, but in what you give, not in how others see you, but in how you see yourself, not in the position you occupy, but in the heart you carry. 真正的价值不在于智慧，而在于内心。True value is not in the position, but in the heart.